So we're going to start with you. Salmon Leap Girls, tell us all about it.
Okay, so myself and Aisling Smith, I suppose we were chatting to each other 3 years ago, and we were talking about our own experiences coming through the national and international system and training, and being kind of lonely, and just not having much support in terms of other females around the place. Going to races and not having other females there. So we were kind of thinking, what can we do to make this better for females coming through the system? We noticed that there was a big dropout at the age of 14 and 15. And that was a time where children were starting to come in through summer camps, maybe at 12 and 13, and then they might do it for a year and then get too embarrassed or anxious, or they're afraid to try, more tippy racing boats. And we decided that we had a look to see if we could maybe make things better for them. And so we came up with an idea of having a Salmon Leap Girls group. We found a day that the club traditionally has as a day off, so there's nobody else around. And we had a very supportive committee at the time, and they continue to be very supportive. And I suppose we started off with 5 girls. And we taught them about the different boats, and how to set up their seats and how to get into a boat without falling out, and how to get out of a boat without falling out, which I suppose when you're a teenage girl, you don't want to be doing that in front of people around the club. So they became more comfortable on the water, and they also became more comfortable because they knew somebody, they were going down, and they'd met new friends. So we saw the value in having a social aspect to the group. So I suppose we kind of worked on that side of things and made the group as sociable as we could, and also incorporating a small bit of training into it and explaining why we were doing that and what they were doing and why they were doing, like what was the end goal as such. So as the group progressed on over the course of a year, it went from 5 to then bringing a friend along. It multiplied to 10, then it went to 20, and I suppose every Friday we'd meet up, and Aisling was very involved with the higher ability group, explaining to them what exactly a training session was, explaining to them how tactics of racing, getting them ready for certain parts of a race that they might be nervous about, whether it be a turn, when boys or girls might be coming up on them at high speed, how they get out of the way quickly, or what they do to give them more confidence. And we're very lucky in Salmon Leap that we have a kind of very structured, differentiated ability grouping within the club in terms of training. So we have an A, B, C and D group. And usually the girls went into these groups on their own because they didn't know anybody. So with having the Salmon Leap Girls group, they were going in with a certain level of competence and confidence entering into the group. And it meant that there was a very natural system there that they could fall into and develop under the club system. We had a huge amount of support and advice from John as to the best way to go about things. And then also he had a group that he could come to as well if he needed us to work on a certain aspect of their training. So it kind of was a team effort, I suppose, to get the Salmon Leap Girls to where they are. And now at the moment we have had 3 years of the Salmon Leap Girls, and we have girls that now are training at a very high level and are competing at, well, up to now they were competing at international level in Nottingham, and I suppose going abroad to sell it and stuff like that in Spain. But I suppose when we were starting back, our aim was that we'd have enough competent girls to fill crew boats. And after a year and a half of having the Salmon Leap Girls, we had our first K4 where we didn't have to rely on the British girls filling them boats, and it was brilliant to see the girls out there and competing, and they were very competitive within the groups, and they've all managed to progress. So we're looking forward to COVID being over so we can get them out there racing again.
Yeah, there were some really interesting points in what you were saying. Like, you obviously, with Aisling, you identified a need to create a safe space for these girls to progress in. Fun seems to be a big thing behind what you do, that fun and social part, especially, well, any teenager would obviously be very happy for that. And then the way, I think it's really interesting how you're reintegrating them then into the actual club structure. And some of them have gone on to compete abroad, which is really impressive within that time frame. Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to want to know more about that project. We're going to pass on now to a quite different discipline. So Dave, are you ready? So Freestyle, you want to tell us a bit about your project, Southeast Freestyle?
So Southeast Freestyle started maybe 2 years ago. Over the summer, I was back home kayaking with some juniors from Canoeing Canoe Club, and a few people then approached me saying, would I start coaching? And from there, it developed on to every weekend we started going out coaching. There was one girl and a few guys, and since then it's really kicked on. So we've got loads of juniors out paddling with us now. We've got women out, got men out. It's kind of really changed. Like, there's huge potential for us in the sport at the moment because there's so little structure. So once we started adding it, like, people enjoy paddling, but there's no way to do it together or to learn. And so once we started doing it together, we just kicked off, started flying.
Oh, that's brilliant. So yeah, more like you're a very accomplished freestyle paddler yourself, still competing at a very high level internationally. Did coaching come naturally to you, or like was this something you had always had a desire to do, or how did that come about?
So I definitely think because I didn't have a coach growing up, we had to learn for ourselves, and I got into coaching quite often myself. And from there, I decided to study sports coaching and performance. I didn't think I would be able to coach or be involved in high performance freestyle or kayaking. I thought I have to do another sport. And then in my third year, I did an Erasmus with the GB freestyle kayaking team and realized I could do this, and they had full-time professional coaches. And from there, I realized I came back and I started coaching full-time alongside competing. It does allow me to compete full-time, but it's very satisfying to see the kids get a new trick each time. Each time you see it, there's a bit like, oh yes, this is brilliant. And kind of when I learn my own moves, and that's kind of I really enjoy that, and that's what's really kept me to it.
So seeing others achieve gives you a sense of fulfillment.
Absolutely, especially over the time frame, because there's very much, I think I realize, is you can't learn a move in one go. It takes a lot of time. So anyone thinking they're going to do this straight away and then getting frustrated, which happens all the time, it's quite interesting. And when they stick to it and after a few months they start learning, you can gradually see an increase, and it's quite satisfying to see that.
Yeah. So Michelle, like, you've been a coach for quite a long time now. You're obviously a player in polo. You then went into coaching, and then you went even one step further where you went into coach development. So what would you say made you make that step into coaching?
I suppose it was when I was playing, and we kind of found it difficult to get coaching from season to season. It was always a battle at the start of the season to secure a coach, and winter training was very much kind of leaving it to our own devices and training together as a team and being, I suppose, intrinsically motivated to keep it going rather than a coach being there to bring us right the way through the seasons.
So from your own personal experience of maybe lack of consistency of coaching, you felt there was a need to then coach yourself. That was something you wanted to do, then give back to the sport in that way.
Yeah, I was very much kind of started off with kind of junior development. The smallest children kind of during the summer coming along on kind of a Saturday a month, and worked that way, and then kind of thought we really need to put a structure in place here, so then moved on to being coach developer.
Brilliant. And what would you say is the most enjoyable part of coaching?
I think it's building the water confidence with the really small children. Their first time in the boat, and then watching them progress over the summer, kind of on those Saturdays. That's really kind of rewarding. Is that water confidence that we can kind of slowly build.
Yeah, and Karen, for you then, where do you see the satisfaction in the project in Salmon Leap Girls?
twofold for me. I suppose from a very basic level, I love the seeing a girl or a person starting off in a kind of very stable boat and then finally making it into that fast racing boat and being able to, you know, train in it with confidence, and the look on their face when they actually manage to paddle that boat successfully. Because I suppose going from, you know, from a very stable boat to an unstable racing K1 is a tricky, daunting task for anybody, and it's brilliant to see their face. But I have to say, and I didn't realize this until I actually witnessed it, but last year one of our younger of the girls that started with us, she's now probably about 14, and she was standing beside us on a bank one day, and she was giving instructions to other girls, and it was just lovely seeing her having come through the system and have starting off being a child with very little confidence in her own ability, to suddenly being there and being the voice of reason to the other children or teenagers that, you know, were nervous, and totally understanding what they were going through and getting it. And it was brilliant to see her advising them, and actually what she was telling them was brilliant, you know, like it made sense, and they listened to her. And she was, you know, kind of helping out with older girls that might have been 17 or 18, and it was just brilliant that she developed that confidence. And I suppose that would stand to her in every walks of life, and it's just brilliant to know that she got that from taking part in a Friday evening group with a group of girls.
Yeah, I totally get that part. It's not underestimating that human journey that sits within it all. And I think sport can teach young people or anyone so much. And something like that, I just send someone who's went from being quite reserved and shy to having that confidence to be able to instruct others and help others. I think that's incredible. Like, you couldn't dream of better outcome, really. Dave, what do you find the most satisfying in the Southeast Freestyle project?
Probably the community involved. It's quite a lot of fun with them, a lot of stress, but a lot of fun. And then the challenge of each individual trying to help them develop in a way that most of them for their paddling career will spend most of their time without a coach on the water. So trying to figure out ways that I can help them develop without me actually being there. It's quite interesting, just the complexities of breaking down how they learn.
Yeah, that is an interesting part. So I guess, yeah, you want it to be that potentially your paddler doesn't need you anymore.
Well, I think
if you get that good.
As a coach, that's what you're looking for, that they can do it without you.
Yeah, and there's I think something not to underestimate as well, especially in groups, is that peer learning part. So as Karen was talking about there, how they can learn from one another and how they can pass on the information. And it's also a way for them to process it, is being able to pass on that information to somebody else.
I would say that it's huge in freestyle, because once one kid learns a trick, the next person sees someone that they would compare like similar to themselves, and they realize I can do that too. Whereas if I do something for them, it's like, well, he's way off in the distance, I can't do what he can do. And that peer learning, like, so long as they see it from different perspectives, they learn so much, can be so much quicker. Something that for me, like, I think one kid is miles off learning something, his brain gets it, and suddenly the kid is right there with him. It's quite interesting.
I think it works the same with aspirations, you know, particularly with you know, the girls that we work with, because usually they're comparing themselves to males, and you know, there is no comparison, and particularly on a competitive level, as teenagers grow, males and females obviously grow and develop at a different level and different stages. So it's great when they see like their peer having a high expectation of themselves, because they believe then that maybe they can achieve that too, or they might be a year off achieving it. And I think, you know, that's another kind of benefit of, you know, them paddling with their peers, really, and the systems and projects that we're working with.
Yeah, it's the back to the message, can't see, can't be, and it's creating those role models even within the group. Michelle, so you've taken on coach development, so you're teaching other people to be coaches. tell us a bit about that. How's that different to actually coaching yourself?
It's a nice one. It's very rewarding to see people that you've taught how to coach actually coaching. You do feel a little bit redundant when you're watching it and you're not on the water with the children. But it is really, really good, and you're kind of going, oh, they're really kind of settling into it, and the confidence that it brings to their own game as well. We had a session last year where we had 6 kind of 16, 17-year-olds. They're now kind of 17, 18 now. And just watching them coaching and then their own confidence in their game is really brilliant. So it's a completely different feeling than actually coaching.
Yeah, because obviously we're all individual and every single coach has a different approach. It's so when you're doing coach development work, how do you encourage people to find their own kind of coaching style and way of communicating and managing a group, etc.?
That's a big part of the program that we're putting together, is kind of everyone kind of understanding that people have different ways of communicating, they have different ways of learning, and different ways that they'd like to receive information. So actually having to teach people that their skills themselves has kind of, I suppose, honed my own skill in that, and kind of knowing that I have to do things 2 and 3 different ways in order to get my message across. And then watching them actually practicing that on the water with children is really very interesting. And you can see some kind of faltering and then growing in the confidence when they practice it a few times, and then the penny dropping that actually this is a really good idea. So it's good.
Yeah, I think that, well, yeah, there's nowhere better to learn how to coach than actually coaching, and it can seem like a big scary step, and then once you start walking and you start realizing, you start getting the feedback and the feel, it becomes, yeah, very interesting. And sometimes we have these aspirations and ideas, and once you test them with the reality of a group on the water, you have to adapt, and you might have to change some of those aspirations, or they might be reinforced, as you say, depending on how it goes. Dave, would you be able to describe your coaching style? Is there something, how would you describe it?
Probably quite soft and interactive. Definitely compared to another coach, I've got in my mind's eye who'll be much louder. I'll be a little bit quieter, more observant. I'm very much trying to support the individual at what their goal is, rather than catering to a whole group, I would say. Thoughtful, but then I would say that someone else might say he's ignorant. So it depends on your perspective.
Sorry. Yeah, it's funny. I'm laughing at that, but it is true when a coach is in action. If you're observing from the side and you don't necessarily understand the coach and what they're trying to achieve, as you say, it can be misinterpreted sometimes by parents or observers on the side. So I guess one most important public is your athlete or your group, so as long as they understand it. And it made me think of a saying I came across when preparing this. It says, I suppose it is tempting if the only tool you have is a hammer to treat everything as if it were a nail. So that's Abraham Maslow. And it's kind of that part about the group and the individual, and being able to cater for individual needs in what can be quite a large group, which development work can be. So Karen, do you want to explain a bit about how you guys manage that?
I actually kind of agree with that in terms it's really important to get to know the children or the teenagers that you're working with. You know, I like to spend a bit of individual time with them at some stage during the session, to find out what their goals are, you know, what they want from canoeing, you know, if they're just coming down for fun or if they actually want to become more competitive, and try and, you know, set up the session to suit everybody's needs. Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think also it's important that they realize, you know, the expectations that we have of the group when they come down, you know, that it's a bit of fun, but it can be more. And, you know, that I suppose we're coming from a competitive club, and it's all right to not compete if you don't want to, but obviously that's the direction that we're taking. with a lot of what we're doing. Like, I suppose we have a big group, so we have to make sure that we have it sectioned off to cater for individual needs, whether it be age groups, it could be friendships, and it could be just, you know, anxiety as well. We'd have a lot of difficulty with weather. We'd be very weather dependent, because we've a lot of beginners in very tippy boats, and if it's very windy, like, we have to look at it, and if it's going to be a miserable session for them all, is it worth going on the water, or are we better off to just take it on land and, you know, go in and use some paddle machines or whatever and try and make it fun? So you have to just be very you know, very wary of what are very aware of the group that you're coaching at the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Michelle, how would you teach a coach to kind of gauge their public, a bit like what Karen was describing? Okay, we do an outdoor sport, so there's obviously weather conditions, but there are different elements. There could be anxiety, there could be knowing where that person's at. A teenage life can be quite complicated sometimes. How do you teach aspiring coaches to kind of gauge all that?
I think we have a module where we're looking at behavior management, and it's trying to understand what emotions are causing that behavior. So somebody might be acting out, it may be that that's just them, or that they are afraid, or that they want to impress their friends. And it really is about kind of watching and listening, and just being aware of and how it's interacting with the group as a whole as well. So you may have somebody who's really loud, and that's okay, the group can cope with that. Or you may have somebody that is just being disruptive, and there's no fun. So it is about watching, listening, and kind of getting to know the personalities and knowing what personalities work together. So communication would be a big thing that we would kind of try to get across to the trainee coaches.
Yeah, and being realistic as well. There's obviously a lot of trial and error in that. Like, nobody gets it right all the time, and sometimes we make mistakes as well as coaches. Dave, is there anything along those lines? Like, is there without going into a specific situation, like maybe a learning experience you've had within the last years, and when you reflect back on it, you go, okay, no, that wasn't the best way to go about it?
There are a few, I'm sure. I can't think of a specific one at the moment. I think I very much noticed that soft skills are really important in terms of, like, when you speak with an athlete, if it doesn't make sense to them, the information you've given is not right. So, like, definitely what I would like push for other people now is that when you're actually trying to give someone information, it has to be right to that individual, so you need to know them. And sometimes I'll find that I'll give someone information and it doesn't make sense to them. And when we work with some of the guys who are trying to work some things out for themselves, or they see what another person is doing and think they have an answer to it. And I would very much push them to try and give someone else advice, because just when someone says it, someone else says the same thing, somehow it seems to make sense to them. And I just think the soft skills of how you present your coaching is very important. And as over the last few years, I think I've realized again that there are so many ways to learn.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, is trying to adapt your coaching to all those different learners out there. Like, there are so many different types of athletes, so many different aspirations, motivations, and in a teenage group and a development group, it can be very diverse. I think as you move up more in performance, people, their paths are maybe more driven and they know exactly what they want, but in these age groups, not necessarily. And is trying to cater for all in that can be quite difficult. One was, what do you want an athlete to feel in the environment you create? Like, in your projects, what do you want the athlete to feel? Or for Michelle, what do you want that development, the coach who's developing, to feel? What's the environment you try and create?
A safe environment, so somewhere where they feel that they can actually learn and share their experiences with the group. If people aren't comfortable, be it in a coaching kind of training situation, or even being on the water, they're just not going to learn. So that confidence has to be built, and that's starting at the door of a trainee coach's program, or it's when you meet the child for the first time at the side of the water. It's exactly the same thing. You're building the confidence, you're building the trust. If people don't trust you, they're not going to open up and learn.
Yeah, without trust, there's no relationship. Karen, what do you think? What kind of environment do you hope someone
I suppose like that, a safe environment also is very important. A welcoming environment where there's no judgment, there's no need for anxiety, and we can talk about how we're feeling and, you know, work through it together as a team. And I suppose that the girls are proud of themselves and what they achieve, even if it's something small, getting in and out of a boat without falling in. That's a big achievement for some people at the start, to getting a medal at an international race. And then finally, that you have kind of developed a sense that they want to give a bit back, that they can see as they get older what they've gained from the group, and that they might want to give a bit back, even if that's just helping out every now and then, or offering a small piece of advice to maybe somebody that's nervous. I just think that's the type of environment we'd like.
Yeah, I love that, especially that celebration of all achievements. There is no small achievements. As you say, it depends where you're at, what you're aspiring to. I think that's a really important part. Dave, what kind of environment do you try and create in your freestyle sessions?
I would say relaxed, supported, and curious is what I'm going for. That's what I'm looking for in them. And
something just as you were talking there, fear. Obviously, you're more in white water. How do you manage that? How do you work with that? Because it can be a stumbling block to further progress.
So it definitely has to be built up. I would say a lot of it does come down to trust. Definitely with more beginner level athletes, trying to very much kind of say, do you get them to a state where they trust me, and that I wouldn't put them in a situation that they couldn't handle. And that does come up from putting people on small things to bigger things. Like I think the word my own coach uses is, how do you know what's right until you've done it or experienced it yourself? And until you know what's right, you have to basically base that off of other people or other perspectives. And I'm very much trying to get people to believe that, like, they can do this if I believe they can do it. So I think that comes down to trust there to get over that sort of step.
Yeah, it's trying to install that belief, and then create that safe environment again, like Michelle was talking about, and physically safe as well, obviously, when we're in white water too. Yeah, and with this webinar, who knows, you might have even more numbers. You've inspired more people, and hopefully you've inspired others to take on other projects and coaching roles, etc. Thank you very much, Karen, Dave, and Michelle, for your time and for your passion and the incredible projects you're doing.